God is good, and with each day that passes brings us a day closer to the launch of Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. This is the Napalm channel, and if you are new here, please consider subscribing, especially if you're interested in Pantheon related content on our march to launch. Today, guys, I want to talk about camping, dungeons, out in the world, whatever the case may be. Camping and why that's so important, something a lost art, something that doesn't even happen in MMORPGs at all anymore, and something that I really believe Pantheon's bringing back, but I believe they're bringing it back in a different kind of way. And I do believe that camping will be prevalent in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. I think it'll be something people do in dungeons and out in the world as they're leveling up and grouping up. I think it will naturally happen. However, I also think they're going to do something a little different as well. Something that I think a lot of groups will be doing. And I think that only comes naturally because of the way that we've almost become accustomed to playing MMORPGs. And it's something you see them doing when they stream, etc. Now, obviously in a stream, just sitting in one spot and camping probably wouldn't be ideal. Now, you'll also notice that a lot of the times when they're streaming, they will usually be moving through areas with lower level mobs in them, and they're still, they're easier, there's not a lot of danger there, a little bit, but they're still not dying too fast. There's still a little bit of time investment on each pull, but they'll be moving through. And that's mainly because they're trying to show off the dungeon, trying to make an entertaining stream, that kind of thing. But actually, I believe when we're actually in the game playing and we're actually in a group and we have a goal of getting experience the best way possible and the most time efficient way, I believe that we'll actually be finding a really good camp spot and spending time there, parking there and camping it. And there's a couple of reasons I think that this is definitely the way a lot of us are going to end up playing the game. So because it's open dungeons, they're public dungeons, and this isn't an instance where we're just, running from point A to point B and defeating the dungeon, and we'll actually just be exploring it. It's not a beatable thing, it's more sandboxy, as in you just go in, there's cool stuff there, there's named mobs, there's awesome different goals you could have, but you're not just there to get to the end of the dungeon, beat the final boss, and then get back in queue to do it again. So there'll be multiple groups in every dungeon, okay? So there could be 20 different groups of people in a dungeon, and we're going to be finding places that make sense for us to park our healer and our DPS at so that we can pull and continue the experience train. So there'll be a lot of interaction with the other groups, right? Like another group could start pulling from your pool, could start your group of NPCs that you've been getting your pulls from. Other groups could camp in a spot nearby and begin pulling from your resources of experience, you could say. All kinds of interactions can happen inside of these public dungeons, and it does make each location feel more alive and more dynamic. And every experience will be different because it'll depend on what other people are doing in this place, this spot, or this dungeon that actually changes your experience as well. So it's not a Groundhog Day effect, no matter what. And that's without even getting into dispositions and all the other things that actually help it not be the same experience every time. But that does affect your camping. So I want to talk about that a little bit. So even if you're camping the same spot, I think we're probably used to an EverQuest type experience where if you have a favorite camp spot, for the most part, your experience in EverQuest or any other old school game was, for the most part, the same. You were pulling the same kind of mobs from that favorite camp spot, etc. But in Pantheon, they do want to mix even that up a little bit, and that's where the dispositions come into play, and also where group makeup comes into play. Now, that was true in EverQuest as well. So, depending on who's in your group can definitely affect how you pull, how often you pull, strategies during big pulls, etc. Of course, that depends on, do you have an enchanter or a bard in your group? Obviously, that allows you some CC, so you can pull differently. And all kinds of the relationships between the different classes are definitely going to be a big part of that. But the disposition system, as in these bonds, these pops where the mobs come back, actually will change how they behave. The disposition system will actually dictate how those NPCs behave. So you could end up with all kinds of different types of pools, even in that same camp spot. Also, one of my favorite parts of camping or dungeon experience, or even open world, out in the world type experiences, is wandering mobs or patrols that can totally wreck your day if you're not paying attention or you're not aware of them making the route through your area. Now, we know in Pantheon they talked about several times that bosses sometimes will just decide to start patrolling. So that really changes the entire game, because if the boss suddenly, not just you're used to him patrolling, right, but you're not used to it, and then suddenly he starts wandering through, that is going to cause some very epic adventures and mishaps. I think the experiences we had at Crushbone are probably a pretty good example of the kind of gameplay that we're all expecting and we all want and we're all vying for and can't wait for. A lot of times this is where, especially an early game, that you're making the kind of friendships, the kind of alliances, and building your reputation, is while you're camping in a place like Crushbone. This kind of thing cannot happen with instanced dungeons in a queue, especially when the queues are spread out across all the servers. You're never going to see these people again. It does change the way you and everybody around you behaves when you know these are people on your server. These are people who are going to remember your name. These are people you're going to be playing with in the future. And it just changes the way everybody behaves, and it's a good thing. Now, let's talk about another exciting thing to me about camping, is that when a high level shows up in this low level zone, gives you some buffs, or even decides to power level you. This changes everything. Now suddenly, you're in areas of the dungeon you had no business of being, taking on mobs that you had no business doing, and experiencing things that you normally wouldn't get to see for several more levels. This is another kind of emergent gameplay to me, because it's like real life. It's almost like when you're a kid and you're not allowed to ride your bike past a certain point, and then one of your parents or a guardian hops on a bike and takes you out into places you've never ridden your bike before. It's kind of that same kind of relationship, that kind of human experience, and it's very interesting and it's very fun, and it's one of those things that really makes you invested in the world itself. And let's also not forget that because of the dynamic roles that different classes can play, that they're actually, I talk a lot about high levels helping low levels, but actually it can go the other way as well. A low level can actually assist a high level with a res, dragging a corpse, scouting an area. There's all kinds of reasons that actually a low level with a specific class that high level needs can be useful. And like the things I just mentioned, those are some things that we'll be seeing in Pantheon, where actually a high level will actually maybe even throw some gold to a low level character, which it may not be a lot of money for that high level, but it'll be a lot of money for that low level to help them out and to do things for them. And once again, building your reputation, it feels really good to help out somebody else, especially a high level. When you're a lower level, you're already looking up to them, then you get to do something useful for them. That is a really cool feeling. And also, I actually think it'll be a thing, because it was in EverQuest, where high levels will pay low levels really good amounts of money to farm low level things that they need for crafting, etc., that they don't feel like going out and doing. Killing a ton of skeletons for their bone chips kind of thing, right? And the low level can go out and do these, get experience for doing it. It's the kind of things they'd be killing anyway, and instead of just selling them in a normal manner, they can actually be approached and say, hey, look, I'll pay you a lot more if you gather these for me than you would get, out in a trade type system. If you help me out, I'll give you these cool buffs, I'll help you, be able to do it faster, but we're going a little deeper into the dungeon with my group, but I do need these. So if your group wouldn't mind to give me your chips on my way back up when my group is done, a little deeper, a little further in an area where you guys can't go, where, high levels are hanging out at, on my way back through, I'll pay your entire group for your services, right? And that, once again, that's emergent gameplay. That's a really cool thing, and it's a low level doing something that actually benefits a high level. So it goes both ways sometimes. And I think that that's kind of the dynamic of an interesting game that isn't completely theme park based, right? These are kind of sand parky kind of elements that make the world so much more interesting and makes every day that you spend in this virtual world that much more interesting and refreshing and new. And once again, avoiding that Groundhog Day effect, all these things, and these are player interactions, which in my opinion are the best. Those are the really memorable things when you have any kind of interaction with other people, as opposed to just running quests all day long, running dungeons in queues all day long. This is where the glory is, right? These public dungeons, all the interactions you can have in them, camping. I love camping. I love finding a good spot, grinding out that XP, hanging out. We're talking, there's some downtime, we're getting to know each other, we're learning each other's skill levels, and helping one another. You know, you see somebody who's not using an ability that would be really useful, you say, hey, how come you're not using this? Or do you have this ability? Do you know how it works? You know, and helping other people out. And although sometimes that can get a little annoying, you know, people get a little bit, in my opinion, too stat driven, and they go too far down the algorithm path. To me, I'm just like, okay, man, you know, we're talking about a very small change in the experience that, you know, I'm not interested in, right? But once again, even when you don't like it, so they'll give you some sort of information that you'll remember, and you'll later on, maybe when you get to a higher level and you're actually trying to make use of every single percentage of whatever it is your class does, that you can put that to use. So it's just an interactive, living, breathing world experience. And I just want to talk about it a little bit because, you know, there's some things we've talked about, but not really about the dynamics of camping, right? And a lot of people don't like to camp, right? And I think in Pantheon, by the way, that there will be a lot of groups who actually, they don't sit in one spot. They're constantly moving, and they're moving around the dungeon, and they're just grabbing what they can, and they're exploring, and they're maybe even doing the perception system as they go, and they don't like to sit in one spot. There'll be groups like that. Even if you like to just camp, you're going to end up in groups because they'll have spots available, and you'll need XP, and you'll hop on, and you'll end up in a more progression, moving kind of camping, right? So maybe staying in the same general area because that's where the level of mobs you need are for the good experience, but not finding a specific spot. I'm a big fan of just finding a good little spot where you can tuck away your squishies in a nice safe corner, and maybe the ranger goes out and helps pull, and the tank gets the aggro off the ranger, gets it to the group, stacks it when there's multiple mobs. That is the kind of gameplay, man, I just absolutely love. I could do all day, every day, all night, every night. That's the kind of stuff that for some reason just resonates with me. However, in Pantheon, just like when we watch on the streams, although in my opinion a lot of that is because it is lower levels, if you pay attention, they're just kind of breezing through to get to the cool stuff. And once they get to the harder, their level, or a little higher content, that's usually about where they end up. And that's like the area they're going to. So I know they're streaming and they're making it interesting, etc. But in my opinion, it's laying the groundwork for when we were actually in a group. Besides when we die and we have to get back to our spot, I feel like we're gonna mainly be camping, and that is a beautiful thing for the reasons that I just mentioned. But guys, let me know, what do you guys think about camping? Is that what you want to do? Are you more into moving around more often, not a particular camp spot, but just a camp area where you kind of move a little bit more and you're constantly trying to go a little bit deeper into the dungeon or into the world? What do you guys think about that? What are some of your memories you have in Crushbone or Guck or any of the other areas in any old school game where you were camping? You know, EverQuest, Final Fantasy XI, Dark Age of Camelot, whatever game it is that's your fancy that you played in the day. Tell me some experiences you had camping. Or maybe you hate camping and you can explain to me why, and how you're going to try to avoid that in Pantheon Rise of the Fallen. Guys, I hope you enjoyed the video today. We do have a stream coming up. It's supposed to be on the 16th. We'll get more information from Visionary Realms. Of course, we'll discuss that when it happens. But until next time, guys, God bless and happy gaming. Listen to what I say. I've been making videos all day. My friends all say I'm it's a video buffet. You can even hit replay. But please just subscribe. I can't even describe being part of my tribe. I'll even offer you a prize. But just please just subscribe and hit the bell notification too.